Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is this: Giants and the End Times. I have had the book When Giants Were Upon the Earth, The Watchers, the Nephilim, and the Biblical Cosmic War of the Seed by Brian Godawa for years. And I never actually read it. I always meant to, but never did. It is actually an appendix to the fictional Chronicles of the Nephilim series. There are two appendices, actually. I have both of them. And so I finally decided, all right, I'm going to see what this says because I am reading the fictional book Enoch Primordial right now that is in this series. And there's a foreword by Michael Heiser and I really had a lot of respect for Dr. Heiser, and he affirmed the validity of the things that Brian Godawa was talking about in regards to this Nephilim, whether you want to call it lore, whether you want to call it history. Brian Godawa did his homework. So I thought, okay, I am going to read this because sadly I have had to put the Genesis 6 conspiracy book away for now. It was part 2, which I have loved the Genesis 6 conspiracy books. But in the second one, in part 2, the futurist eschatology in that is just, it permeates the entire book. So it's not even like about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's just the baby is in the entire, actually no, it would be the bathwater. The bathwater is in the entire book. Like there's no missing it at all. So I just can't bring myself to read Genesis 6 conspiracy right now. Maybe in the future when I have a, I don't know, lower blood pressure. No, I don't know. My blood pressure is not high. But anyway, I'm rambling. So Brian Godawa is actually a partial preterist. And so his views are a little bit easier for me to kind of get through as I'm reading things. But I had to laugh as I was reading the very first chapter of chapter 1. And that's actually what prompted me to do this video. So I want to share this quote with you now. In recent years, there has been a rise of interest in the subject of giants called Nephilim and the sons of God called Watchers in the Bible. Much of this interest swirls around the end times crowd and involves speculation that approaches the absurd. Visions of an impending return to the days of Noah, with cloned Nephilim among us, the Antichrist coming in a UFO, and watchers masquerading as alien saviors. It makes for fascinating and entertaining reading. Now, when I say that I had to laugh as I was reading that portion of the paragraph, I'm not laughing at the people who believe those things. I am laughing because that was me just a few years ago. As many of you know, I was really into those Gary Wayne books, the Genesis 6 conspiracy books, and he prominently wrote about how just as the Bible says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. He always took that to mean that there is going to be some prominent role that giants are going to play in the end times. I was also a big fan of Timothy Alberino and talked about his book Birthright on here all the time. And it was his view that transhumanism was going to come into play in the end times. And he talked about that a lot in his book Birthright. He talked about UFOs, he talked about aliens and Nephilim. And yes, all of that comes into his eschatology. I also really used to enjoy the channel Celebrate Truth. And in that, he had a very well done documentary about an upcoming fake alien invasion that was going to usher in the Antichrist, and that they were going to use Operation Bluebeam in order to do this. And I was all into this. Like, I absolutely was. But now, where I am at right now, fulfilled prophecy has clarified prophecy in a way that I never imagined. It helped me to realize that I was taking biblical prophecy and I was also accepting other people's theories of biblical prophecy that were, in essence, turning the Bible into a sci-fi book. And, some of the same people that I mentioned before, the Gary Wayne and Timothy Alberino and Celebrate Truth were using what Gary Wayne calls newspaper exegesis and to to uh to come up with their end times views. And they were also, there's a lot of generational provincialism, especially, when you think about things like transhumanism and how those things have to be in our end time scenario, when the Bible doesn't speak to anything like that at all. Let's go to that verse, actually. It says, no one knows, sorry, this is Matthew 24, verses 36 to 38. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. So I have heard people say that verse 38, when it described in the days before the flood, it said people were eating and drinking, and they actually tried to say that that was referring to giants who were eating people and drinking their blood. And then when it says marrying and giving in marriage, they were saying that that is referring to when the sons of God were taking wives of their own choosing. But that actually didn't happen in the days of Noah. Um, and so if you actually read the verse for what it says, it is very clear that in the days before Jesus came in judgment, people were just going about their everyday lives, not even realizing what was coming, despite all the warnings. And it was mainly the unbelievers, because we do know that the Christians, when they saw the army surrounding, you're probably confused if you haven't been here before. That's okay. When the Christians in 66 AD saw the armies surrounding Jerusalem, they fled and went to Pella, because that is exactly what Jesus told them to do. He told them that they should flee Judea when they saw the armies surrounding the city. The unbelievers did not. And despite all the warnings, despite all the prophecies, they just kept carrying about their everyday lives, ignoring what was looming on the horizon. That is what I believe this verse is referring to, not about giants making an appearance. And I realize now that this belief that I used to have, that giants were going to be like they were just going to be everywhere in the end times, and I believed the same thing that Timothy Alberino said, that transhumanism was going to play a role. And not that I think transhumanism is a good thing. It is not. However, I don't think that it was talked about in the Bible, and it had nothing to do with the end times, because as most of you know, I believe that that was all fulfilled by AD 70. A lot of what I believed, though, it was just a flight of fancy for me. And it was akin to every other generation that places whatever technology and weaponry they have of their time into the book of Revelation. Like, there are people still now who comment on my channel telling me that the book of Revelation was talking about Black Hawk helicopters. Okay, sure it was. Does that mean that I don't believe that there were giants, or that there could still be their descendants today? No, because you all know that I believe that these Nephilim were giants. I know that there are people who say that they were just men, exalted men, either rulers or the sons of Seth. I have heard all of those theories. I have gone over those theories, and Dr. Michael Heiser, he made a very, very good case for these Nephilim actually being semi-divine, coming from the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God, the Watchers. And a lot of this, and Genesis 6 doesn't tell us a whole lot about these Nephilim. And you have to wonder why. And most people will say, well, not, yeah, most people. Most people will say that it's because, or at least most people who have looked into this will say, well, that's because the people of that time period, they already knew what it was talking about. And I would say that is correct, because the people, especially in the Second Temple period, they did have the Book of Enoch, which I know people will say, oh, well, the Book of Enoch, that's not canon, so we can't use that. Well, did you know that there are multiple books that are quoted in scripture that were not canon. Many of them. The book of Enoch is one of them. And there are, I think, approximately 60 possible instances of the book of Enoch being referenced in scripture. And I might do a video about that sometime in the future. But yes, the people who wrote the Bible, they took the book of Enoch seriously. So I certainly don't see why we shouldn't. Reversing Hermon, Enoch, the Watchers, and the Forgotten Mission of Jesus Christ by Dr. Michael S. Heiser. I have it in my hand right now. I have read it a couple of times. I have used the information in so many of my videos, and the research in this is absolutely meticulous. And I want to share with you one of the passages that he wrote in chapter 2. By the end of this chapter, readers will see quite clearly that the Second Temple Jews did not attempt to strip the supernatural elements from Genesis 6, 1-4. Rather, they affirmed them. This in turn will prepare us for chapter 3, when we will go back in time to the original Mesopotamian context for Genesis 6, 1-4. At that point, the reader will be able to grasp a crucial fact for our study. Second Temple Jewish writers understood and preserved the original supernaturalist backstory from Mesopotamia. This literary inheritance explains why these Jewish authors wrote about Genesis 6, 1-4 the way they did. One of the issues that I have had with people who say that this is just talking about people and that they weren't actually giants is that there are stories of giants all over the world. And they are very, very similar to what is in the book of Enoch. Now, a lot of the nations around the world with these giant stories, they kind of deify them and they make them the good guys, which is not what happens in the Bible or in the book of Enoch. But I think that we do need to take into account that the people of the Second Temple period, they knew what was in the book of Enoch. They knew what other cultures believed as well. And I think that sometimes we're kind of snobby when we think, oh, well, they didn't know what they were talking about. They couldn't have possibly been well read. They couldn't have possibly known what other cultures thought. Well, how do we know that? Actually, we know that it's the exact opposite. So you might be wondering, okay, well, what do I think about giants, and what do I think the outcome of all of that was? If they did not show up in the end times, and I don't think the end times is a future thing, I think that it's done. So I certainly don't think that they were coming in the future, and I don't think that they had a prominent place in the end times that actually occurred. On page 3 in Reversing Hermon, Michael Heiser said, if one were to ask a modern Christian, why is the world and all humanity so thoroughly wicked? The chances are very high that an answer of the fall would be forthcoming. We have been conditioned by church history, ancient and modern, to look only to Genesis 3 for such theology. But if you asked a Jew living in the Second Temple period the same question, the answer would be dramatically different. Yes, the entrance of sin into God's good world occurred in Eden, but the unanimous testimony of Second Temple Judaism is that the Watchers are to blame for the proliferation of evil on the earth. The New Testament writers, being predominantly Jewish and products of the Second Temple period, were more often than not telegraphed the same outlook. We just can't see it because, frankly, we don't have Second Temple Jewish eyes. We miss what the original audience would have seen. Just a couple sentences later, it says, many readers will recognize that Mount Hermon is the place where, according to 1 Enoch 6:6, the Watchers descended and took an oath to commit the transgression described in Genesis 6, 1-4. This book's title, Reversing Hermon, alludes to the notion, hidden in plain sight in a surprising number of New Testament passages, that what happened in Genesis 6, 1-4 had to be reversed as part of restoring the original Edenic vision. That reversal was, is, and will be accomplished by the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. So what I believe is that the sin of the Watchers was bringing sin into the world and trying to make man in their image. Indeed, making, I don't know if you want to consider them men, but making something akin to man in their image. And some people believe that they were deliberately trying to corrupt the coming Messiah, to corrupt the bloodline of the coming Messiah. And what Michael Heiser speaks of is that Jesus' um, incarnation as fully God and fully man was in order to reverse. It was obviously it was to save us from our sin. That was, yes. But the reason that it happened that way was because it was a reversal of what the Watchers did. It was a reversal of the sin of the Watchers, because again, these Watchers, they tried to make mankind in their own image, and that was reversed when Jesus, the Son of God, was born from a human woman. And the sin of the Watchers of bringing this sin into the world was reversed at the cross, and indeed consummated when Jesus came back in AD 70. So, in my opinion, there are, I mean, we don't know. Like I said, there are still maybe descendants of the Nephilim living today. And I've actually talked about that in a few videos. And I think that's where a lot of the royalty comes from nowadays, watered down, of course, over time, because I don't see, 8, 9 foot tall people walking around other than these few photos that I'm showing you that might even be AI, just showing you just for something for you to look at. But do I still believe that there's going to be this huge incursion of them, and that it's something that was fulfilled in prophecy? No, I don't think that has anything to do with prophecy. I think it's time that we stop treating the book of Revelation as a sci-fi novel, like I mentioned earlier. That is complete eisegesis. That is putting what we want it to say into the scriptures. I think it's so important that we start to just, as believers, we should be studying proper biblical hermeneutics. And so I'm going to leave a link in the description if any of you wanted to check out this article. I'm not going to go over it here, but this is an article about grammatical historical interpretation. And it is so important to have sound hermeneutics when reading Bible prophecy, because as we can see, we just read all kinds of stuff into the text that isn't there. And it just comes from whatever interest you happen to lean towards. People will find a way to put that into the text when it's just not there. So anyway, that's my video for today. Some of you might be disappointed and say, that's not what I was expecting. Well, this channel is about telling the truth. And so I believe that this is the truth. And that's why I shared it with you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. Or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.